Hello, and welcome to Meeting in the Sacred, a podcast where each week we invite you into diverse conversations about physical, emotional, and spiritual well being in the pursuit of wholeness. My name is Danielle Chandler. I'm a Christ Path mystic and wholeness coach.
And my name is Teresa Noach. I'm an author, intuitive reader, and spiritual life coach with an eclectic spiritual background. And whether you are curiously seeking, deconstructing, reconstructing, or just feeling lost, you are welcome here. Oh, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm live with Jessica. Say your last name again.
Poirier.
Poirier, I knew that. With Jessica Poirier. You can read in the caption here. I'm going to give you a little bit more about this beautiful soul that I have the pleasure and honor of bringing to you today on Meeting in the Sacred. And I'm Teresa Noach. We are live streaming from my page, so you probably know that. And this episode is the 9th episode of season 2. And we have one more episode to film before we actually go to upload season 2 on every major platform. And we're super excited about that. And so this is episode 19, and we are calling this Raising the Universal Frequency. And before we get into unpacking some of the ways that I just love how my soul tribe sister here, Jessica, is raising the universal frequency with her life and her light, I do want to say a shout out of love to my co-host and my partner and founder of Meeting in the Sacred, Danielle Chandler. I love you. I miss you so much. And our listeners and we miss you, but we're so happy that you're not here because you're with your baby. And Danielle had Kai about 3 weeks ago, and they are just doing amazing, and they're just marinating in those early days of motherhood and baby. And so we're happy you're not here and that you're checking out and taking the time to really just embrace and love this season. We got your back. We love you. We got your back. We're going to keep going with Meeting the Sacred until you're ready. We'll be here. So that's all I'm going to say before we just start jumping right in. So I've invited Jessica today. And if you've been listening to our podcast for any period of time, you know that I've been exploring a variety of spiritual paths, one being shamanism and ancient traditions of various indigenous people. And I cross paths regularly with many beautiful mystics and healers. And my guest, Jessica, today is like no other. You really are. She is a mystic and works with the celestial powers of the stars, planets, and the thunders. She has a background in esoteric traditions of Gnosticism and Hermeticism. Did I say that right?
Gnosticism, yeah.
And Hermeticism?
Yeah.
Okay. As well as a formal initiation in Eastern lineages such as, will you pronounce these for me? Mikyo and Taoist magic. Mm-hmm. She has ancestral roots from the northern native tribes of Ojibwa. Mm-hmm. Ojibwa with you can say this one.
The Jesukeed
seers that also work with the stars and thunders directly. That's just I feel it. I feel the vibration in my heart. She is a devotee of Sophia, the great cosmic mother, and in particular, her celestial manifestations as the Dakini. She normally works as an instructor in the academic field with a background in mathematics and theoretical physics, where she bridges the realms of spirit with the universal laws of the cosmos. I love it. I love it, love it, love it. Welcome, Jessica. I'm so excited to have you today. We've been talking about doing this for a little while, and I'm glad that we're finally manifesting this in the natural realm. And so before we start talking about the universal frequency and the collective, I'd love for you to just talk to us a little bit freely about your background.
I have an interesting background. I started out pretty young. Like I was a natural born mystic, like from the start. I grew up actually in Detroit. Literally, like, I'm not sure if you're familiar with 8 Mile Road. Like most people are somewhat famous within Detroit, 8 Mile from the movie.
Yeah.
And I was a mile north of 8 Mile. Like that's where I grew up. And I didn't really belong in the area. I feel like I incarnated through both my parents, like to clean up a lot of the ancestral line because there was a lot of problems on both my father's bloodline and my mother's bloodline. And it gave me a lot of like really intense, like almost like traumatic early life experience that I had to really like step up and like overcome some of these things. So that was pretty much my early child life. But, I was always studying like really strange kind of like sacred texts. Like I started elementary school studying the book of Revelation, the book of Enoch. I was really into this. My parents weren't religious at all. Like they were Catholic, but not really practicing. So I started reading the Bible, studying these like more esoteric Christian texts. And I ended up reading the whole Bible. My parents actually sent me to middle school, a Catholic school, because they were like, oh, well, she's, into all this spiritual stuff. So maybe she'll like a Catholic middle school. And that actually did not work out for me. Like I remember winning like Bible competitions, but I would always fail at like the Catholic history where you have to know all the Pope stuff. But I would always have all of these things from the actual Bible study that I did on my own when I was in elementary school. But being in the middle school for the Catholicism and like seeing this like heavy religious like Saturnian energy, like I kind of got away from all of it, for a little while. And then, I had my teenage years where I went through a lot of the more traumatic experiences and a lot of like wild experiences. Um, and then I ended up in college, and that really was like my saving grace to get out of Detroit. So, and then I just kind of went gypsy status for a little while, traveling, experiencing things.
Wow.
For me, when I started practicing like meditation early on, when I was about 19, and that was really useful for me in my path because I had already studied a lot of the different spiritual traditions as a child. But then when you start to actually have a practice and a committed, devoted practice like meditation, and I was doing it twice a day, like in the morning and at night. And to me, that was my communion with the divine. And that was where I got the most growth. And I went through like a full spiritual transformation. So that was really what I credited a lot of my early transformation and overcoming some of this stuff that I went through when I was younger. And later on, I actually got more involved in shamanism and like working with the sacraments like ayahuasca and some of these other ones. And that really helped me with like shadow work and really going deep and overcoming a lot of the ancestral trauma and some of these things. And also like as like an initiate of someone that's in these deeper spiritual traditions, I had a lot of really profound initiatory experiences with those. But early on, I used them knowing that I wanted to learn how to attain these really higher level states of consciousness on my own. I didn't want to rely on externals. So I got really involved in internal alchemy and, taking my meditation and my practices to the next level. And who really helped me with that was my teacher, my sensei. I ended up meeting him after some of these really profound initiatory experiences I had that almost left me like terrified of the divine at one point. Because sometimes when you really have these really profound spiritual revelatory experiences, they leave your ego mind like shattered and like terrified, So he helped me a lot, and I really credit him with a lot of my later growth in my spiritual path.
Wow, I find it so really fascinating that you came into this incarnation with this hunger and desire right from the get to like dig into these, as you call them, esoteric, starting off with esoteric Christian texts or ancient biblical texts. You said the book of Revelation, and then you said the book of Enoch, which we know isn't included in the Canaan.
Right.
But many people and many of my friends that I have on Facebook now too would um, would more align themselves with Christian mysticism or just mysticism in general, but they'd also have a strong fundamental Christian background. I mean, I have so many, I have such a eclectic group of people that I just love. I mean, you being one of my eclectic, buddies and on social media, and I love to read your articles. But I'm just going to give a shout out real quick to one of the individuals that has been really monumental for me. We don't really know each other on a personal level, but I came across Truth Seeker, and I'll tag him in this. I came across Truth Seeker when I first started going through my, what I call unraveling. I started questioning my dogmas. I started being presented with these opportunities to really look at the other side of this double coin, this double-sided coin. And it was, for me, I understand now why. At the time, I didn't understand. Of course, I know a lot more now about what I was feeling and why I was fearful, why I was afraid. That had a lot to do with what I was undoing, was the fact that there was so much fear. And in my heart, in my core, I knew that that wasn't the frequency of what I understood of Yeshua. That wasn't the frequency of what I understood of the divine. That wasn't the frequency of what I understood of God. The other thing was that didn't make sense to me, that started having me unravel, was that it never sat right. Oh, I'm going to get emotional about this. It never sat right with me that there was no divine feminine. And of course, in my church life, we didn't use the word divine, although I did, interestingly. I started a women's group one time, and I called it Women Divine. And I never heard the word divine really used much in church, just like another word that you don't hear used a lot in church would be sacred. You don't, at least not in I wasn't Catholic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe in Catholicism more so, but in charismatic Protestant Christianity, they're also working really hard to be very different from Catholicism. Obviously, breaking away from Protestantism is the breaking away from Catholicism, and so there's also this strong effort even now to make sure they don't look, sound anything like. Because to most people in, especially non-denominational Protestant sections, people that do more than just go to church on Sunday morning to feel good, people that are like fully devoted to this way, they see the Christian church or the Catholic Church as like the Antichrist.
Mm-hmm.
It's so interesting, right? So, and in talking to people, I'm like, but you do understand that, like, that the Bible that you read is still a spawn of the original Catholic text, and so, but when I started to question this idea of this all male deity, but yet at the same time, this male God is, I'm learning, and church loves me so much, and I was created in his image, and male and female created in his image, and I was so conflicted because I'm like, wait, I'm reading the stories about Jesus. Now I'm talking more from a literal interpretation because I want to dive in a little more to what Gnosticism means. But for me at the time, reading this through a literal interpretation and seeing and experiencing Jesus through a literal interpretation, the person of Jesus that I read about didn't line up with this father that he represented.
Mm.
And it wasn't making sense. He treated women seemingly different than the apostles did. He treated women seemingly different than the God that I'm being preached about did. Not even that the scriptures say, because I believe that the scriptures are interpreted, because I can actually read the Bible now and see the divine feminine all over it.
Right.
All over it. Right. So it really was interpretation and perspective. And so what really drove me deeper into questioning and unraveling was that when I asked questions, either leadership, there was like birds chirping, leadership didn't know how to ask the questions, or they would just give me a black and white, it's in God's word, that's the way it is. And so I just knew that I needed to dig. And I just love that, your journey brought you in digging these things out at such a young age. and then going to Catholic school. So did you ever have to struggle with releasing a perspective of God that came through Catholic
Not really.
theory?
Not really, because I was never able to be like programmed through like a religious
Wow.
interpretation. So I ended up getting kicked out of the Catholic middle school. So I ended up going back to, public school. But at that time, I was already kind of like in this rebellious phase because I'm like, okay, well, everything I was studying as a child, and I wasn't really having these profound like mystic experiences, and I was having visions in elementary school. So because of this like middle school phase, the hormones of everything and all of that, I think I just kind of pulled away from that and went through like a rebellious stage. But when I was actually around like 17, 18, I did date a Christian. And, for Detroit, it was kind of like wild with the people there. They weren't really the best people, like a higher vibrational type of people. But I did meet someone who was a Christian, and he was a Pentecostal Christian. And it wasn't like a radical Pentecostal type of church, but I would go. And I kind of liked it there, but I never really ever vibrated or resonated with that dogmatic Christianity. So I saw this almost religious programming, and I never was with the Saturn cult. I call it the Saturn cult.
Yeah, I want you to tell me more about what that means, because I actually wrote that down a little bit ago, because you were like all this Saturnian energy, and I've been following your articles. And anybody that's listening right now or watching, where's your blog located?
The blog is on my website, astral/alchemy.com.
Okay.
And then you'll find it. It's called Astral Insights, like on the website.
Yeah, it's incredible, you guys. I mean, you've got to, I have a lot of people that are astute, and they love to dig. They love to study. They love to go deep. And so if that's you, Jessica's just got some amazing stuff that'll keep you busy. It'll keep you busy reading and thinking. And before I move back to what you're going to tell me about the Saturnian energy, I do want to finish, because I know I left off with what I was saying about Truth Seeker. So I want to conclude that, because I was giving him a shout out. But when I was going through my unraveling, and I was in this place of like, like asking these questions means I'm on a slippery slope. That's what they teach, and I'm on a slippery slope. Where is it going? Where's this slope going? It's going to go to hell. It didn't make any sense. So I started following the peace. I started following what felt like peace. I started following what really felt like alignment with what I believed Christ was. And so I started following that, but that also meant that I was now more secluded, alone. I didn't have the flock. I didn't have a tribe. I didn't have anybody that could affirm, maybe a little bit of a dark night of a soul experience. I didn't have anybody that could confirm that I was on the right path. I didn't have anybody that could confirm that I wasn't falling away from God, and that was terrifying. I didn't have anybody to confirm my steps. And so I was really called into the depths and the deep and the dark to listen to myself, and to trust, and to know, and I've gotten a word, as we call it in Christianity, a word from the Lord in 2019. And I was ready for this 2020 eagle vision for that year. I was ready for like precision sight. And Christian prophets were saying it all over the place, this 2020 vision, and I remember sitting in my backyard, and I was asking for the download for my year, what's coming. And I heard, you will have fish eyes. And I was like, well, that's cool. Okay. What does that mean? And so I was like, it's not an owl. It's not an eagle. It's not a raven. It's not a hawk. Like, I'm expecting some how do fish see? You already know. They really don't. They're in the deep, they're in the dark, and they're vibrationally led mostly. And so it didn't make sense to me then, but it was actually in the beginning of my catalyst and where I was going, and into that depth and into the deep and into the dark, and to learn how to activate, or have my third eye activated, and have my solar plexus, just everything just blown open to trust, and shortly after that is when I felt that I say Yeshua introduced me to the divine feminine. It was a whole nother story for another day. But the person that I found that was talking about this for the Christian people like myself that were going through this, I was taking a trip to North Carolina, and so I had like 9 hours of listening time, which I love. And I found a Christian podcast that was talking about sound healing. And at that time, I was already kind of venturing into healing my body through, alternative medicine and sound. And they just happened to have him as a guest on the show. And he was talking about all of the terminologies and the words in that mainstream Christianity deems as evil, such as the word occult. He was basically uncovering like the true meanings of these words that are thrown around as demonic. And so when I found Truth Seeker and I heard there was somebody else talking about this, I mean, I was even scared to listen to him because he was so outer thought with Christian concepts that I was even afraid that maybe listening to him, I was being brought away, but I listened to my heart and I was like, no, you're trusting your guidance here. You found this for a reason. And so I ended up listening to him all the way through and I'm like crying and I'm just like, I don't know what's happening here, but thank you for sending someone in my path that's having these conversations because I don't feel so alone. And so I kind of used to joke around and said he was my new pastor. He didn't know me personally, but I'm like coming from a time where you need a pastor to guide you. So I felt like he was really helpful with that. So now I have people in my life to bounce things off of. It's incredible. But there was that season of dark. So let's go back to what this Saturnian energy is that you identified. And did you know at the time that it was Saturnian energy? Like, did you already have that? Oh, okay.
I didn't really know. I call it that now, just, like a slang term that I use because for me as an astrologer as well, I see astrological correspondences in everything. And you see it in religion, all religion, a lot of mystical traditions, they have these, they're really celestial influences that are associated with the planets as the three-dimensional bodies, that we call them by name. Mm-hmm. But there's intelligences, there's higher spirits, there's authorities, powers, principalities that are associated with these celestial influences. So just the term of the planet is easier. Most people can recognize that. Mm-hmm. But with Saturn itself, so Saturn is the planet associated with like boundaries, limitations, restriction, form, the earth element. So it's not all negative, but the negative side of Saturn is it is very like authoritarian, and there's a lot of dogma and laws, and you see that a lot in almost all religion. But even more so in the Abrahamic faith. Just Judaism itself is very heavy on the laws and the judges and the Deuteronomy, like all of this, all of these laws, and if you look at the Bible itself, from the Old Testament to the New Testament, a lot of people in the more New Age community, they associate like Christ with the sun, right? And there's a lot of controversy around that. And there is a correspondence there. There's an association with Christ as the solar influence, but that's an alchemical reference. And it doesn't go to say that Christ is the sun, which is where a lot of these more fundamentalist Christians and the New Agers totally miss the whole point. And they like are divisive and fighting each other. It's both is true. There was a historical, most scholars will actually say that there was a historical Yeshua, you know? They don't really agree with all the myths and the miracles and all of that, but they agree about his life. And how can you not look at the transformation of the whole world? How can that be all a myth? You can't say that's all a myth, right? And if you actually understand, like as an initiate, the miracles and the different things in the Bible, there are a lot of allegories there that are alchemical spiritual references. Some of them are even astrological, but you have to understand, you have to have the eyes to see, right? And the ears to hear to be able to recognize that. So there's a big conflict over like associating Christ with the sun, but there is an association, a correspondence. Yeah. So I just wanted to kind of give that disclaimer right away, because if you look at the Old Testament with the Saturn, right? A lot of Saturn. And then you go to the New Testament, it's all solar. So what you're doing is you're going from Saturn to the sun, just in the Bible. And Saturn to the sun is from lead to gold, which is the alchemy there.
Wow.
In Western alchemy, they have a lot of these metals, these alchemical metals that are associated with the chakras or the planets, right? So lead being the starting metal that you would work through and transmute is that Saturn energy. And then you get to the sun, which is the spiritual influence. So a lot of the goals of alchemy is like spiritualizing matter. So like your body, like what I like to tell people about the book of Revelation is it's an alchemical text. It's like a blueprint to how you actually purify yourself, your body, your psyche, your mind even. A lot of people don't realize that their mind, there's influences within the mind itself that are malefic, and you have to overcome these things within yourself to spiritualize and connect with the divine, because the divine's so high, the most high. How can you raise your vibration and purify yourself down to unite with that energy or force, whatever you want to call it, you know?
I love the way you say, bringing it back to raising the vibration. I love the way you say, how can you raise your vibration? That's that internal alchemy. And how can you purify yourself down? I immediately hear like humility, there's a scripture about, whoever, what is it? If you humble yourself before the Lord, he will lift you up, but the process of that, the other thing that I saw, the visual I got, was when you cook something down to its basic, right? The same thing with purification. And so if the sun is purifying the lead into gold, it's essentially, right, cooking it down like you would cook something in a pot down to its basic.
Exactly.
Its basic. That is really beautiful. I love that. And so when we talk about the term, oh man, there's so much. Like as soon as you started talking about Revelation being a book, how did you describe it just now?
I call it like an alchemical blueprint.
An alchemical blueprint.
And
this
is for individuals. So this has played a huge role in my life. Like I started though with the book of Revelation, studying it. I knew it was symbolic when I was a child, but I didn't know I was a child, right?
How old?
I was like at least in the 5th grade. 4th, 5th grade, 6th grade was like when
studying the book of Revelation. and you didn't have a preacher's interpretation. So you didn't have this fear-based, like, Jesus is going to come back in the sky and we're all going to be left here. And half of us are going to be gone. Half is going to be here. What about my children? Like a lot of Christians have all these fears because it's like they're seeing these, that's something else that I want to touch on too. They're seeing these, what they see as prophetic foretellings in Revelation happening in the world. And there are some things that even myself, I'm like, gosh, when it talks about the currency, when it talks about the nations coming together to squash that currency, a lot of prophets think that that's happening right now with the US dollar. And so I think that you have a lot more insight possibly on how there's a multidimensional effect happening in that. Same thing when it comes to like the reality of Jesus. Like, yes, the reality of Jesus is there, but there's such a multidimensional picture here that we're not getting the full picture, just getting pieces of that picture and kind of honing in on that one space and then making a whole religion out of it. And so I still do have friends that are studying the book of Revelation with their church to understand our times that we're in right now. And so, of course, we know that with that comes the mindset that Jesus is coming back in the sky on a horse in the clouds. There's a lot of even debate within Christianity over, are people going to be raptured first? And then the judgment's going to begin. Like there's pre-trib. Do you know these terms like pre-trib, trib, post-trib philosophies? Because you have Christians that hold different perspectives as to whether or not, number one, whether or not we're even going to be raptured. Number two, if we are going to be raptured, when that is. So you have these different schools of thought. And so a lot of people right now are feeling like, okay, the book of Revelation has answers for us. But on the what I consider to be an unfortunate side of that story is that it fuels the fire of turn or burn and the witch hunts.
Of course.
Because now we've got, Christians who are being fueled by this. Ultimately, it is fear, even though they don't realize it a lot of times. They're afraid for their loved ones. They're afraid for their friends. They're, maybe just afraid in general, and they're just speaking out of that fear, like get right with God. And I always ask them, well, what exactly does that mean? Yeah. Can you break it down? Can you break down what is get right with God and then what? So I'd love to know your take on Revelation in comparison to the mainstream Christian ideology.
Okay. So for me, the way I see it is the book of Revelation it's like a map for an initiate. And an initiate is someone who is really committed and devoted to this higher alchemical process, really connecting to the divine, right? Like the true essence of the divine, not the Saturn cult, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with this, there are some terrifying types of ordeals you go through. It's purification, and some of it's exaggerated, right? Like some of the things that are happening through the alchemical process, there's stuff going on internally through your hormones and just your physiology, like your whole body will change, right? And your mind and your emotions, there's purification will come out. So there's like a lot of different things that's a lot of like those trials and the trumpets and the seals opening, all of this kind of imagery. So on one level, it's a little bit exaggerated and like dramatized, right? But this is like an internal process that you're going through over time. It's going to take a long time. Like a lot of my initiatory ordeals had a lot of this imagery involved in these symbols. And it is, scary when you go through it, the whole revelation process, right? But it's over a long time. You also have to do the work, right? And it takes, discipline and commitment to like kind of apply the things that kind of go on, right? This purification process. So that's on the individual level, but you have the macrocosmic level, right? So on a level of society in the world at large, there's also an alchemical process going on because everything's connected to the divine, right? You have the macrocosm and the microcosm, and the microcosm is a reflection of the macrocosm and vice versa, right? So that's that Hermeticism, the law of correspondence, as above, so below, as within, so without. So even though the focus on the book of Revelation is like an internal initiatory process of this divine alchemy, which has a lot to do with the forces of creation and destruction, because that is of the divine, right? So when you're going through these things internally, the focus should be internally. And you shouldn't really be focused externally what's going on. Like it's useful to know. Like I like, check the news. I have my little conspiracy forums that I check to find out what's really going on behind the scenes. And there's a lot of fundamentalist Christians there, and it's really bad right now because there are like almost biblical things happening, and it is scaring people because of that. But that should be exciting. Like what we're going through, even on a scientific level, what's going on with the magnetic field, the poles are shifting, and that's causing a lot of this really intense division to go on in people's psyches, because even science has confirmed that your psyche, your brain even is affected by the magnetic field of the earth. And we all are magnetic beings, electromagnetic beings, and the sun's in peak activity and it's releasing all these solar flares, and that's activating us on a cellular level. It's affecting our DNA. So we're going through this transformation process through the sun, which again is that alchemical reference, and that's for the whole world, right? So there's a lot going on right now. And it's funny because there are malevolent forces that are trying to block out the sun. If you actually look this up, it's wild. And they try to blame climate change and other things. But if you actually do the research, they're actually trying to block out this energy from the sun. But the sun is affecting all the planets. It's not just Earth. It's the entire solar system's changing. So that goes to show that this planetary association, the solar system, are all connected with this grand cosmic alchemical process that is divinely orchestrated. So that's kind of how I see the macrocosmic stuff. But to speak on the fear real fast, because that came up with the book of Revelations, I had a real profound experience one night where I went into this whole visionary kind of astral ordeal, and like the beast, chapter 12, the dragon, the beast that came, and they showed, and I had to like confront them. I like turned into the whole woman clothed, with the stars, the sun, with their feet under the moon, giving birth to the child. Like I had that imagery come a lot through some of these experiences, these more intense experiences. So I'm going through this and I'm terrified. I'm like terrified, right? Because you're like in these higher realms and experiencing these things. It's scary, So I'm going through all of that, but then I started being, I guess you could say, unraveled, right? All of my mental belief systems, things I read, all these things started becoming unraveled. And I went through this kind of visionary deal of Christ being crucified in Golgotha, in between the two thieves, and it showed me, like the spirit, like kind of revealed what that meant. And it meant the dualistic mind. So the eyes, the two thieves are associated with the eyes. They steal the energy. You're always looking externally, always distracted, right? And Golgotha literally means the place of the skull. So the alchemical reference to that crucifixion, how you apply that internally, as within, so without, is that you have to like crucify the dualistic mind that's always seeking and looking outside, and a lot of that's fueled by fear. Okay, so when this was revealed, it showed me that these beasts, especially the one that has like the leopard body in chapter 13, that one rises out of the sea, right? And it gets its power from the dragon. And the spirit showed me that beast represents fear. It literally represents fear. And like one of its heads gets like chopped off or something. And then there's the blasphemy that like is on the head. It was showing me that like when you have this fear coming within you, it's getting its power from the dragon, which is the instinct in the mind to get distracted and to separate from the divine. Because we were all originally separated from the divine as spirit, our souls kind of falling into matter. So that separation, which again is associated with Saturn, that limitation, boundary, the separation. So that initial impulse to be separate from the divine and go seeking into matter and carnal indulgence and, all the distraction, that initial impulse is what's fueling the fear. Because the fear like kind of comes up in your mind. Oh, look at this. Oh, look at that. Let's be scared. And you're giving all this energy to the fear and to the dragon and to this beast. And then you're not able to bring your awareness deep within and connect to the spirit, So by you always looking externally into the matrix, like people like to call like the reality out here, the matrix, and associate that pattern, which is true on one level. But by you always being external, looking, seeking outside yourself, you're giving the energy. And a lot of these fundamentalist Christians, that's what they're doing. And it's so bizarre. They're so obsessed with it. And they're missing the whole point and doing the opposite.
Yeah.
And that's how these more malevolent forces work, because there are malevolent forces, especially in the lower dualistic kind of reality we live in. And they serve a role. I don't like to tell people to ever have fear. I had fear when I was like new and going through some of these experiences because they are overwhelming. But once you get beyond a certain level, like you have to go through challenge and adversity to really overcome some of these things. So they serve a role. There is a purpose. There's a divine role that they all serve. And it's for you to overcome these influences, so you can connect and raise your vibration or, really ascend or get raptured. The rapture, right?
The rapture.
Really with an internal thing.
Exactly. And we see that also thematically throughout the entire Bible. And, I've heard some pastors, because they can really be mean to each other. I've listened to a lot of different, all philosophers can be too. I've listened to, is it Ted Dawkins and who's the other guy? He's more of the metaphysic biologist from India. Anyways, I've listened to them talk, and they're not very nice to each other either about their differences. So it's not just pastors, it's anybody. Thinkers can argue, and they can get really passionate about what they think, and that doesn't help us raise the collective vibration to get angry about our perspective. But I've heard even pastors knock other Bible students or disciples for seeing themselves in Scripture, for seeing their stories through the story of Goliath and the David, seeing their stories through Christ in the desert, seeing their stories through Moses, growing up as a Hebrew in an Egyptian palace. And I always think that's fascinating to be able to see your world through the lens of these different stories and these different archetypes. And I've heard many people get into a pulpit and say, stop making the Bible about you. And it's so funny because it's like, again, this contradiction of like, but I thought we believed that, we're living epistles. I thought we believed that the word is written on our hearts. And that was another thing that came to me too, was, I had gone to, my first church experience was amazing. It was exactly what I needed in that time in my life. And it was actually the first time I'd heard a pastor. He was a pastor. He was tatted up, and like the church was real like hippie artsy, cool. Like I felt comfortable there. And I remember hearing him say, and I'm telling you, like he probably got hate mail after it, But I remember hearing him talk about how the Magi were astrologers and how the disciples were like pretty much all like, the equivalent to today's hustlers, gangsters. Some of them were, and we see a little bit of that depiction in the new film that's out, The Chosen.
Yeah.
It's really, it's sweet. But seeing, as you were talking about, having to slay those demons, having to, and again, you would call that the alchemy, that's going on inside. Now, I experienced fear, in such a very subtle way, because, I have a pretty courageous, fearless, brave pioneer spirit. It's in my astrology.
Yeah.
And so if if there's a devil, like, let's go, let's take him down. Right. So fear had to work more subtly in the consciousness, in my mind, in self-doubt, paranoia, self-hatred, rejection, things like that. So that's really where, for me, the demons would hide in these circumstances, because don't show your face to me. We're going toe to toe. Like, they know I'm gonna fight you. So, so it was definitely more of something that I had to really tune into. And I said this on one of my other podcasts, kind of the way I see this experience right now of my life is that I knew what I was coming here essentially to experience. I don't want to say to do, because I do believe that, we evolve and we choose, and everything's not exactly laid out. As of right now, that's what I believe. That we can shape the clay, we can mold the clay, we can fill in the lines on the grid. But that essentially that I knew, and I kind of had a contract, agreed. I don't know a lot about karmic contracts, but I resonate definitely with it. It all resonates with me. Something else that Christianity has thrown out is incarnation, reincarnation, when it's all over the Bible. And it's even in Jewish rabbis will talk about it, that there are specific people that they know for sure were reincarnated. They don't believe everybody, gets 100 times, but maybe 4, 5, 6, but they have a level of that belief, even in Judaism. And so that's not talked about in Christianity. And so when I started even seeing those correlations with, like, John the Baptist being, who do they say John the Baptist was? Elisha? Oh, right. And then, they said Jesus was David, but even also there are parts where it says that, matter of factly, not maybe, but it says he was the second Adam. And so if we want to look at a literal translation of this, there's an implication that there's this coming back, this purification. You have the Adam, right? And then you have this come back, and then you have the Christ, right? So this purification process is happening through humanity. And so I started to visualize and get this vision of me having this agreement to come here. I'm starting to understand what it was I agreed to more and more. I don't fully know everything, right? But I started to understand what I agreed to. And when I realized that when I made the agreements to come here and accomplish certain things, that I also had a full-on team, that I had like a team of celestial beings and supports and angelic, and if you want to call them ancestors. I don't have clarity on exactly who all the team is. I'm new in this understanding. And so, it's been a gradual getting to know these things, but I can definitely say that I know I made an agreement. I said yes to something. And when I said yes to it, it was like my whole entire team was like, now we're going to hold you accountable to that yes, right? And we're going to help you, and we're going to guide you. And when you feel like giving up, we're going to be there making sure that you have, that we've done our best to make sure you don't give up, even though giving up is still a choice. I could still give up. And there were times in my life where these fights were so dark that, I didn't want to live anymore. I didn't want to keep feeling this pain. I didn't want to keep feeling like, my entire life was just going to be, I'm going to be a victim. I felt like I literally came here with a target on my head. And in some way I did. I had to slay that. But when I realized, and I've become more and more aware of the guides in my life, not just a blanket Holy Spirit but individual guides with specific things that they bring to the table. Some much more involved than others, some seasonal. And so one of the things that I heard was like, you know, they are holding me to my yes. I said yes. And I jumped down the slide through past all the archetypes and into this realm. I said yes. And I said yes to, you know, raising this vibration first within my own family, as you were talking about for yourself, within my own family, changing the course of destiny for an entire bloodline of people. But that goes further because we are now understanding that, you know, our family is the family, that we are one human family, that we are one species, and that there are deliverers that said, okay, I'll go. Okay, I'll go. And I'm not saying I'm a deliverer, but I'm relating to the archetype of Moses and the archetype of Daniel and the archetype of even Jesus, you know, and Jeremiah and the prophets, these archetypes that, you know, were willing to go through the fire. Then you have, you know, Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, they're willing to go into the fire. They're willing to resist. There,
what you just brought up, that's an alchemical reference as well.
Yeah.
The meaning of the names and how all three of them come together in the furnace. And then there's a fourth one that appears that's actually very much in alignment with like the Eastern alchemical process.
That is amazing. Yeah. That is amazing. That leads me to a question I had, which we've already covered a lot of it. Somebody must have just got here. The dogs are barking. We've covered so much, you know, just naturally. It's beautiful. I wanted to know, you know, you did say that you felt that you had a specific role in raising the frequency for your family. Hang on. I think the speaker doesn't work well when there's other sounds going on. So I want to make sure I'm not breaking up. So you said that you knew that you came to change, to raise the frequency for your family. There was stuff on both lineages, bloodlines, and you've been working to do that within yourself.
Yeah.
And it ripples out. It changes the energy far beyond just yourself in ways that you can't see. If you have the tools, and if you apply them, and if you decide to take the journey, I am convinced that part of our divinity is the will. You know, a huge part of our divinity is the will, and we can tap out. And I think for people, you know, I think for people that came here determined, their team, I felt like my guides are going to make it really hard for me to tap out. But it is always still a choice. And so having that courage, you know, we get the courage from each other, also from having these conversations and talking about the different things that we've gone through in life to get where we are now, to be able to talk about this inner alchemy process and the purification process that is so important. So many people talk about things like this, raising the collective vibration, but they're not doing the inner work. They're going to the shamanic circles, and I run into people, you know, at the different events that I go to. A lot of people are suddenly trained in shamanism, and I'm like,
right.
I haven't even, you know, right. I haven't even like been around it long enough, but I know that's not how that works.
Right.
You can't put this in a university. And of course, that's what we want to do over here in the West. You know, we want to monetize it. We want to put it we want to now make it an elite process, which it's like, you know, in an elite process based on this, as opposed to a process based on your calling and the amount of apprenticeship and initiation and all of the whole process that I don't know that much about. I'm definitely called to I'm called to understand this path and to fully submerge myself and surrender myself to the ancient wisdom that's offered through the indigenous communities, and glean and learn and see where it takes me. I surrender to that. I'm thankful that I've been called to understand and walk in the ways of loving and relating to the earth, the elements, to each other. It's just been a beautiful experience for me. But a lot of people in the alternative spiritual community, I say alternative, meaning anything outside of, traditional religion. So people in the alternative spiritual community, which is very trendy, I notice right now, are using these terms like frequency and vibration, and let's raise the vibration. And there's a lot of different ways people are using that term. And so I want to talk.
A lot of it is associated with spiritual bypassing as well.
So there we go. Tell me more about that.
Raise the vibration. Well, it goes back to this Western consumerist spiritual movement. And it's not even just in the West anymore. It's all over the world because
we're global.
According to Eastern traditions, like we live in the Kali Yuga, or even in Tibetan Buddhism, we're in the degenerate age. And when we're in this time, according to these traditions, there's a lot of this more darker influence. What the Bible would suggest is the end times. Yeah. So it's really talked about in all traditions, this time period, which is an alchemical phase, really, right? So we're supposed to go through this darkness. Actually, according to like some of the Vedic stuff in ancient India, they say during the Kali Yuga, you have more time, like you have more ability to actually transcend and like liberate yourself from this stuff. And like maybe what would have taken someone, 25 years meditating in a cave back in like better times. Now, if we just devote ourselves to 2 hours of practice, we can achieve the same amount that they would have done in historical times. I thought that was interesting, because for sure I've done a lot of work in just this lifetime, and there's so much out there. Consumerism, spirituality, like distraction, like all of this stuff. And right now it's so in your face that it's bizarre. I'm like, how do people not see it yet? Like, it's almost like these forces are like being used and like coming out right in the open because they almost want people to like see them as they are. So then, things can like progress, like let's get the party started,
Wow.
People are just so like lost in these distractions, these indulgences, so with the spiritual stuff, there's a lot of that right now, so the spiritual bypassing is just that distraction. It's like, okay, let me focus on all of this, and it's an escapist tendency. And
let me focus on healing people. Let me focus on healing people. I want to heal people. That's a big thing. I'm a healer. I want to heal people. And like, I've been really careful to use that word healer. And I have felt like I have even felt, when I'm in like a public venue, like in the Spirit Fest and whatever, you have to put a title, and I hate it. I'm an Aquarian moon. Okay. I don't like titles. And trying to find a box is really hard. Also with a Pisces rising, it's hard to find a box. And so I don't want to have anybody that is working as a healer to feel like I'm saying, anything about them, but they know it too. If they are genuinely working and called to and working in this realm as a shaman or a healer, they also understand there's plenty. And right now, what's the planetary alignment going on right now that speaks to the rise of the fake guru, Jupiter, and I forget what it is, but I heard something.
Yeah, Uranus probably.
Yeah, the rise of the fake guru. Like right now we're in like a season of that, and
that's been going on for many years though.
Yeah. I guess it's supposed to, like you said, everything's becoming more concentrated and picking up more pace. So I definitely want to put that disclaimer out there that I know there are a lot of genuine, as we would say in Christianity, anointed, powerful, called initiates, healers. And most of the time you don't hear out of their mouth that they're a healer though. Sometimes they, again, I'm not going to judge anybody's walk where they are. But
that's a good point that you bring up, because a lot of people put these labels on themselves: healer, shaman, like all this stuff. You're just like amplifying your ego. That separation from the divine, and you're trying to decorate your ego with all these spiritual badges. Someone who does healing work, they know that they're a vessel for the divine, for God, whatever you want to call that force to come through and do the healing. And it's really the individual that is in this receptive state. They have to do the healing. They have to be okay. A lot of people they're actually kind of attached to certain things. Like
Yeah.
they use them as crutches. So they might go to, get massages, go to chiropractors, or, get Reiki sessions, whatever they do over and over again. And they'll never let go of this crutch. So they'll always have to keep going. And again, it's that escapist tendency, that spiritual bypassing. Like, let me just go feel good and indulge this level of comfort that I have,
Yeah.
and they're not willing to do the work, because the real spirituality is rough. Like
Yeah. Well,
really
it's kind of like the simplicity of what are you putting in your mouth? How are your circadian rhythms? Are you going to bed and getting up? Do you have good sleep? Do you have meditative practices? Are you eating with honor and respect for your temple? Those are some of the hardest things for people to master. Like you said, instead, they'd rather go to the gym and spend 2 hours lifting weights in the gym and still have everything on the inside jacked up. That was me. I'm telling you, I used to work out 2 hours a day until finally, I got the invitation of disease to take a good hard look at the things that were not working for me, because I was trying to bypass certain things that I was not comfortable with, certain disciplines that I wasn't ready to adopt, certain things I wasn't ready to give up. And so, I had to come to the terms. And here was the next thing. I was offered what? A Band-Aid, the medicine to take for the thyroid, the medicine to take for the anxiety, the medicine to take for this, for that. And I knew in my soul that I didn't come here to live on these pharmaceuticals for the rest of my life. And so that's where I started my journey to self-heal through what Pachamama has to offer. I still do love to get my massages. I still do love to get the treatments. I still think that feeling good is great. It's important for us to have these pleasures, but you're right. There is this element of completely bypassing just the simple. It seems like they're so simple, and those are the things we avoid. I wonder why. Why would somebody rather go to the gym for 2 hours instead of just change the way they eat? And do yoga for 40 minutes in the morning, like, which is amazing. That's how I live now. It's like I embraced yoga and I changed the way I eat, and I have a flow and a balance about my life. Dropped all that extra weight. Don't have to friggin' do cardio 45 minutes a day to try to strive for some body that, again, I was wanting I was wanting something else other than me. But that's getting back to this raising the universal frequency. I guess where we're kind of headed with this is it's the inner work. It's the individual work. And that is how we raise the universal frequency. And when we do this inner work, we begin to align with other individuals that are harmonizing with us. Their music is harmonizing with us, and then that energy just begins to be amplified, and it just begins to grow with its intensity. And it's not because you're out there changing everybody else, but we're alchemizing within ourselves through the highest frequency. Talk to me, where did we get these terms? Frequency, like what does that even mean? Frequency.
Which I do have a background in as well.
Comes from what?
The term comes from physics, right?
Okay.
So I do have the background in the physics.
Yeah, you do.
Frequency technically it's like it's the inverse of time. Okay.
Wow.
So for example, if you want to think of like a period, it's related to periods. So like the way that our Earth rotates all the way around the sun, right, over a year. So there's frequency and there's period. So 1 year would be the period, and the frequency would be like an inverse of that. So it's kind of associated with time. And a lot of people miss that. But like usually when people learn about frequency, just in basic like high school level science, like it's a cycle per unit time. So you have like a sine wave, which is one full cycle, right? So when you raise your vibration or your frequency, you're making it faster. There's more cycles per that same unit of time. And it's tossed around the new age communities more often than not, but there is a scientific understanding of raising the vibration, right? Even the Earth is changing, like the rotation. A lot of these things actually affect the frequency of the planet on a subtle level, right? But the Earth is massive, right? So if we start to speed up, right, and we're rotating faster, we're actually elevating our frequency on the whole Earth. There's some actual ancient traditions that associate the 360-day year as like the normal year, and the extra 5 days was like a really bad year. And there's been some theories associated with like maybe something we got hit by a comet or something happened like ancient times, and it like created more of a tilt or a wobble to the planet, and that affected us and lowered our vibration. And you have like Christian mystics like Edgar Cayce. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
A little bit because of the book you gave me.
Okay, yeah, the Christian, he's profound Christian mystic. They called him the sleeping prophet. He was obsessed with the Bible. He started going to these trance kind of states and like giving people advice and like just almost like channeling, right? And he got scared and he stopped, and he literally read the whole Bible to make sure like he was in alignment with everything. So he started like really fundamentalist Christian, and then he had this ability, right? And he talked a lot about Atlantean things. He predicted a lot of things. He worked with Nikola Tesla, presidents. I think Roosevelt. Yeah. So he was
as an astrologer or just as a channeler?
No, just a channeler. Yeah. But his channeling wasn't like, he's opening himself as spirits are coming. And like you see a lot now in these new age communities, which is very dangerous and usually not even actually going on, but but he wasn't really doing it like that. He was in a trance state, and it was like he was doing like almost like an astral projection. He was reading, the term Akashic records come from him.
Wow.
But what a lot of people don't know about him is he was very much into Christianity. A lot of it was, referring people back to Yeshua, Jesus, and the Christian path, So on one level, some people like in the New Age are like, oh, he's a New Age, like he's the father of the New Age and all this demonic stuff. But he actually talked a lot about Christianity, and he predicted these texts getting discovered, both the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi, which are the Gnostic texts. They were discovered 2 years apart.
Wow.
A lot of people get them confused. Dead Sea Scrolls are associated with the Essene community, which is more like a mystical Judaic sect, where scholars say Yeshua was actually associated with them. He wasn't associated with the Pharisees or the Sadducees. He was associated with the Essenes. So almost a lot of the scholars associate Jesus with this Essene community.
John the Baptist, right? John the Baptist also.
Yes, he for sure. Yeah, and they had different communities from what I've heard, but I think scholars, they only know about this Qumran community, which is where they discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I've also heard that was a little bit more like intensive, like more like focused on the laws and stuff, but they had astrology, they had mystical practices, they had a lot of stuff there. So just like the Gnostic traditions, there's a lot of different lineages and currents, same with Judaism and even the Essenes, because they had different groups, different communities in other parts, of the region. So the Dead Sea Scrolls are associated with the Essenes. And then you have the Gnostic texts, which are kind of compiled into the Nag Hammadi library, a lot of people call that. And those both were discovered in Egypt, different locations, of course, but, very associated with these times. The Essenes would have been first. They actually, a lot of the oldest, actually like scrolls, like the Isaiah and all these Old Testament scrolls are actually found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And you could see them unedited because they're older than the other surviving things that they have reference to. So you can kind of see where they were editing stuff and kind of like spinning certain things, So that's interesting to get into, but it is an intensive topic, right? Nag Hammadi, I've studied the Nag Hammadi for years now, because a lot of my initiatory kind of experiences had to do with these Gnostic things, like the archonic forces, the demiurge. I didn't even know what that was when I was like confronted with some of these experiences, and it left me like bewildered. So I started studying more into the Gnostic stuff, and it's in alignment with a lot of even like Eastern, like Buddhism. People don't realize it because Gnosticism in itself is very allegorical. There's a lot of symbolism because it's more meant for the initiate who can see and who can understand these topics, right? So for me, that was something I devoted a lot of time to studying, just with my own personal experiences. I consider the Book of Revelation a Gnostic text, just because John was in the spirit when he had his vision. Like that's very much a Gnostic experience. Gnosis, just to clarify for your listeners, Gnosis is the Greek term for knowledge, but it's not just intellectual knowledge, it's not any knowledge. It's knowledge through experience. So it's like divine experiential knowledge. So that's revelation right there. You have a personal direct connection with the divine, with the spirit, with the Most High, and then there's a revelation. There's that knowledge, that experience that happens. And unfortunately nowadays, even though we have access to these texts that were like tried to be destroyed. You know, a lot of these groups were destroyed, persecuted by the Catholic Church and some of these other groups. So when we discovered them, there was a lot that, you know, scholars could learn now that wasn't just, oh, they're a bunch of heretics, right? Which were the early church fathers would always call these different Gnostic groups. Yeah. So they're able to learn a lot, you know, but again, they're for initiates, so it's a little bit hard to decipher. So if, like, when I first heard Gnosticism, I thought it was wild. I'm like, what? The demiurge is like there's another deity and it's not a real false god. And like, it sounded crazy. Sophia, there's a goddess, there's a female goddess. Like, it sounded really wild, like almost like pagan. Like, it sounded like this scary, like weird kind of form. But then when you start realizing that this is all symbolic of things going on within yourself, then you're like, wow, it's super profound, you know? So yeah, that's what I would say is the difference between those two. Yeah, for the most part.
This has just been incredible. I'm telling you, when I watch this back, I'm going to make notes on the next podcast that we have to have because I have to have you back. I have to have you back. There's just so much I want to unpack.
Yeah, we could do a podcast on the cult of Saturn. We could do one.
Oh my God. Like, I didn't even, yes, I'm telling you, I don't want to monopolize your schedule, but this is just, I mean, and Danielle's going to love this so much. You were talking in the beginning about the macrocosm and the microcosm, and we did an episode on that early on in the beginning when we were talking about what does God mean, you know, what does God mean to us, and talked a little bit about how just from a primitive standpoint and scientific standpoint, how the brain evolved to look for a God, you know, outside of them. And it's just been a lot of fun exploring these, but I've been wanting to unpack some things with you for a long time, and you're an amazing astrologer and many other things and a wealth of knowledge. And we're going to have to leave the astrology question that I had for another podcast too, because that's a whole nother thing.
That's a whole topic, because there's a lot there's so much biblical references and people miss it, all because Deuteronomy 18. I'll say that like now, but all because Deuteronomy 18 and people misunderstand that verse so much, you know.
It's true. It's true. And the thing is, I mean, if we're still going by Deuteronomy 18, then why are we going by the rest of Deuteronomy and by Leviticus and by, you know, there's one, and some people are trying to, I mean, but you know, you were instructed to stone your children. You were instructed to murder witches. You were instructed. There were all of these other things in there that are just glossed right over and not understood. And I even heard the other day, I am finding this happening in the Christian prophetic realms. You know, and I love the Christian prophetic because I feel like at least they're kind of the misfits in mainstream Christianity, because they do get a lot of, they do have to deal with a lot of rejection in mainstream church. They do have to be the seers, the ones that are tapping into another realm that people don't understand, and they're bringing it in. And so I have a lot of compassion for some of those prophetic people, because that was also me too. You know, my ability to see and feel and we call them declares, if you want, you know, my prophetic giftings, if they're not accepted by the Christian community that you're in, you know, that could be really difficult. And so, gosh, where was I going with this? Oh, I've noticed that the Christian prophetic realm is starting to talk more because of the eclipses. And like, I don't know if you know that this eclipse coming up, the solar eclipse is passing over 7 Ninevehs in the United States.
Right. Yes.
What? We have to talk about that another time.
Yes. And that's another chemical thing. The word Nineveh, actually, if you break it down and see what it actually means and what it associates with, it's an alchemical reference as well.
And then the last one 7 years ago was over 7 Salems.
Oh, I didn't know that one.
Yes. Okay. 7 years ago over the United States was crossed over 7 Salems. And this one 7 years later is going over 7 Ninevehs. And my friend, she sent that to me. And a lot of times she knows I give her a hard time because I don't like to listen to a lot of them. I'm like, they're like an hour and a half long, and I have somebody else I could really enjoy listening to. And like, I've already heard these and I already know what they're going to say. But I love her. And so she knows to only send me specific things now. Okay. And so she recently sent me one about this eclipse, and, you know, they're calling them the harbingers. I didn't get too much out of what he was implying. He was basically just saying, look at this, like, here it is. But in the beginning of his discussion, he was so diligent to make sure he made a disclaimer. I am not using astrology. He says
Wow.
the difference between, he says this is astronomy, and the difference between astronomy and astrology is the worship of the star, the zodiac. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the problem, the misinformation. But again, like, bless his heart, because there's a part of him that's like trying to get there.
Right.
He's trying, but he's probably got like 10,000, 100,000 followers. And once your network is that big and people are listening to you and you're on that big of a platform, yeah, like, I can't even imagine. I didn't have a platform that big, and it was a hard hole to come through. And a lot of my followers can relate to that too, because even if they've been in ministry in any capacity, be it online or in church, and you've got people that look up to you, you've got people that are listening to what you have to say, you got people that want to know. And I served in that space within my community and within our church, leadership capacity, teaching, spreading dogma, for a while. And so when I started having the discussions more about the correlations that I was seeing in astrology and in the Bible, and it was always something I was destined to know and understand. It was a passion when I was very young, but I shelved it because of the fears in the church. So here I'm bringing it back, and I do have a lot of compassion for people, especially pastors or prophetic people that are starting to wake up, and they're starting to see it, but they don't know how to just come right out and say. And so, in due time, I suppose, as we continue to raise the universal frequency on an individual level, I think there just comes a point where, for me, it just came a point. I did do the pendulum swing thing. I was like, whoop, because I felt like I felt like coming out of the broom closet. I felt like I had to just literally throw it all out there. And then whoever manifests their demons, like, do so now.
Yeah.
So that I know who you are, so you're not trolling my page. And I did that for like a good, 6 months to a year, so I could block and unfollow. And not because I don't want to have a different conversation, but because if you're only here to throw hate and to throw shade and to cause discord, I don't need that. I don't need it. I don't want it. If you want to have mutual respect and agree to disagree, cool, we can hang. That's fine, especially on social media. Maybe not in real life, because I don't have enough time. I just don't have enough time to like not be with people that are all willing to grow and learn, So
a healthy energy exchange.
Healthy energy
you don't
exchange.
have to agree with certain people, but there's got to be some kind of balance there where maybe you could think a different way, but you don't have someone telling you how it is, all super dogmatic, and they're not even willing to consider your point of view or learn. They'll never learn. They're so rigid with that cult of Saturn programming. They'll never grow. They'll never become like anything beyond this like little husk, right? So it's a sad state, like you brought up the prophetic community, and every once in a while I'll check into that, because I have that ability as like an initiate to I can look at any religion and see the essence of truth, right? Beyond the symbolism or allegories, whatever you want to call it. So I do that, with a lot of the Christian stuff, because there's a lot of truth there. And unfortunately, in these other New Age communities, because of this dogmatic, Saturnian, religious stuff, people that are now kind of waking up, like in your kind of situation, they're coming out of this heavy Saturn programming or fear-based kind of religion. But then they go completely full-blown into this New Age stuff, which is a messy situation. So it's like both people are right. Like the New Age people are pointing fingers at the heavy Saturn religious programming, and there's truth there, right? What they say, like, this isn't good for people, right? And then on the other hand, you have the Christians saying, oh, this is demonic, right? Some of it you can technically say is, there's a lot there that is dangerous, I'll say. I don't really believe in anything like demonic. I feel like things are all used by the divine for you to overcome these things. But there's a lot of people in the New Age that are, very superficial, this consumerist, like spiritual bypassing, just seeking, their own indulgences. That's not healthy, But it's not healthy to be Saturn and super rigid. Like, you have to literally meet in the middle. And this is the problem with this dualistic, divisive energy. And I noticed this, I told you before, the New Age to Jesus kind of movement going on for years.
Oh, yes.
And this started really, really big when we had the Saturn square Neptune transit. And Neptune kind of, to me, is that energy associated with the New Age, like just complete indulgence, very ungrounded, very mystical, like no boundaries at all, right? And then you have, even with Neptune, more the shadow side of Neptune is the escapism and drug addiction and all this focus on externals, So even that, you see that a lot with the New Age, with their like fixation on plant medicines and drugs and all kinds of stuff. So that was Neptune. And then Saturn, of course, is the religious side, the fundamentalist Christianity or fundamentalist any religion. But you see the square, and the square creates this tension. This was going on for years. And I would see the Saturn square Neptune playing out in the masses, in this way that you have some people, they were going like you started from Saturn and kind of like went and explored other traditions, and then on the other hand, you have the New Age to Jesus movement, right? And I had a lot of friends, like I had a couple that went to Catholicism after like being involved, and they were into more pagan, like Nordic type of stuff. But they were also into like other things that like me and my partner went to, like the Taoist, kind of the Eastern traditions, and they weren't really skilled with understanding it yet. They were kind of new into that, but they were more focused on this Nordic stuff. And I think they saw kind of through the emptiness of it, because there's a lot of these newer neo-spiritual traditions that are empty. They're just trying to revive lost traditions. And it's really about getting back to their ancestral roots, because there's a huge healing that needs to take place. But they're not guided by the divine anymore. They're seeking this indulgences, and there are malevolent entities that come through that can distract people and cause some issues. So I think they kind of saw that. They got a little bit scared. They saw the emptiness of their pursuits, and they went to Catholicism. And I'm like, Catholicism, and me being like a real serious traditional Gnostic, Catholicism was the main issue that divided all of this. And like you brought up in the beginning, like a lot of the Protestant and other forms of Christianity today, they are really the spawn of the Catholic Church, and that's a sad thing. And with the prophetic community, you have a little bit more of those mystics. They're trying to connect to the divine. They're trying to pray. They're trying to feel that connection. And that's really what that Gnostic Christianity is about, that inner Christianity, the mystic Christianity. So I do have a soft spot for them. It's just sad because of the fear and all of this stuff, and this dualistic kind of these views. And even today, like the word alchemy, the word Gnosticism has been like totally like banished in these fundamental Christian groups, that they were not even willing to listen, So that's why I'm kind of passionate about all these topics, because I feel like those people, they can kind of see, that there's something wrong with these New Age spiritual traditions and what's going on with like maybe some of the more elite occult practices that are going on in the masses right now. They can see it, but they don't understand it. So they go into the fear, and they're missing they miss the mark, right? They miss the whole point.
Yeah, it is really interesting, because what I have learned so far through experiencing, different paths firsthand. I joined a Christian Witches Coven, and I have not ever come out and like said that publicly. I'm not ashamed of it at all, and we actually don't meet anymore. And I love the ladies. I don't choose to wear, though, any particular label, but I am a submersive learner. And, the first time I went to yoga, when at the time, I was still involved in a community that thought yoga was demonic. So the first time I went to a yoga studio, I actually was going for aerial fitness. And it didn't make sense for me to get a membership and not be able to use the other classes. So I remember sitting in the yoga studio and kind of like tuning in, right? I was just like trying to feel what I feel and figure it out. And I kind of went like this, and I said, Jesus, like, is this okay? And for me, I heard this like little giggle, kind of like a laugh, like I walked with him enough that I can feel like the personification of this being that came alive for me in such a way, and does for many people. And I was like, is this okay? And if I could see him, like physically see him, he was kind of smiling and laughing. And he was like, of course it's okay. Like, I am in you all the time, everywhere we go. Like, I am in you. There is no fear, and you are free. And and think about that for a minute. You know, it was almost like he'd be like, think about that for a second. What are you here to do? You know, what are you doing? What's the fruit of this? And that's a big one for me, is like, what's the fruit? Because you could take everything else and put it off to the side for a minute and take that one scripture that says you can judge a good tree by its fruit. Right. And a bad tree can't produce good fruit, and a good tree can't produce bad fruit. But then, of course, there's also the scripture of you have to let the wheat grow with the tare, because, you know, a baby oak tree might not look any different to the instant viewer than another tree. So, and of course, if it's not growing fruit, so how do you judge a fruit? So there is the whole, like, even for me, you know, people could look at my journey and think, well, she's learning that, or she's studying that, or she's dabbling in that. But I haven't been experiencing or walking the path long enough for you to really see what the fruit is or isn't. Now, my husband, being close to me, he's funny because, you know, he's my Virgo, earthy energy. And although he is a Libra moon, rising, which helps us a lot to be synergistic, but he'll say, and he doesn't come along for all the rides with me. You know, he just doesn't come along. He's more stoic. And so, but he says it's the fruit, you know, it's what's happening in your life that makes me go, rah, rah, rah. Okay. It's the ripple effect that is having on all of our lives.
Exactly.
That I see. He's like, I see what's happening in you, in your body, in your life, in your relationships, in your career, in your art, in our children, and in our relationship. And he's like, that's how I know. But people outside of my family and my marriage who haven't known me my entire life may not be able to say that. And so Jesus would say, shh.
Right.
Shut your mouth. Don't judge somebody. You don't know where they're at in their process yet. Right. But this has been so much fun. Is there any final words that you have to contribute before we begin to close it down?
No, I mean, there's a lot we could talk about. You
so
know,
much.
like I would love to get into the whole Deuteronomy 18 and the purpose, because I've studied the history. I studied the history because, again, I didn't have that religious fear-based programming early on. So I was more of a seeker. I wanted to know the truth, and I knew there was truth to it, right? So I wanted to find out like what was going on in that region. You have to understand the people, the region, the Canaanites, what was going on. You know, they were sacrificing children. There was all kinds of stuff going on. So that's why a lot of these laws were even formed, and it wasn't even malevolent. Like, oh, it was like some Saturn cult programming from the get-go. But it wasn't like that, like initially, you know. But it has degraded to that. Almost like everything nowadays, all religions, almost all spiritual traditions have been corrupted because we're in this degenerate age. So right now it's just about really what I recommend to everyone is to really have something, whether it's prayer, meditation, some kind of practice where you devote to praying, meditating, trying to, you know, connect to the divine within yourself. You know, don't really focus so much on externals. People love to listen to podcasts nowadays, right? And especially like we brought up the prophetic community, people like to seek that out, you know. No, seek within yourself. You know, if you want to read the Bible, if you want to read another text, God is everywhere. He's within everything. The deeper you can connect, right? So sometimes you got to connect really, really deep to find that divine essence, but that's practice, right? So just whatever someone wants to use to maybe draw some maybe spiritual inspiration, because, you know, it is kind of depressing in these times we're in. There's a lot of hardship going on. People are really struggling. That's why we have these people seeking out religious Christianity from the New Age. They're scared of what's going on, you know, they're experiencing things that are like malefic. So there's a reason for all this to happen. But it's not to go from, you know, what you said, one pendulum swing to the other. Like maybe in the beginning, it's part of the process, right? To balance yourself. Okay, well, I was into the Saturn heavy religious programming, so let me go and indulge in everything, right?
Yeah.
It's part of the work. It's part of the process. But you don't want to get stuck in this extremist level. You want to find balance. And all of it, every religion is all about going within to connect to the Most High, to the divine, whatever you want to call it. You know, they call it different names. But if you really look at the essence of all religion, that's what they were started from, you know, and then it gets degraded and gets all about the law and the dogma and the forms. And it's like, you're missing the point. The point was to connect to the divine, you know. It doesn't matter how you want to dress it up, but it's about going within. It really starts with that process, you know. So that's all I would like to share, I guess, to close.
Yeah.
There's so much we could talk about.
So much. And so when we hang up, you're going to have to look at your calendar and we'll get something else on the schedule, because I'm sure our listeners are really enjoying you and this conversation. And this is live, obviously. So it's going to be uploaded to YouTube in a couple of weeks. So I'll share that date and let everybody know when they can go back and listen to it again. Of course, I'm going to leave it up here probably for another 24, 48 hours. Give everybody a chance to kind of preview and listen to it before I take it down for a few more weeks. But it's just been so good. I have notes. I can't wait to come back and talk about some of this and dive into some of the things that we highlighted. And if you want to connect with, if they want to connect with you, I mean, you do private work. What exactly do you offer on a private level?
So I do a lot of the astrology readings. That's like usually easy. If I don't know someone, I kind of open up, their natal chart and kind of see what's going on, and then I check their transits, anything they might be going through right now, because that's where the real alchemy can happen. Like these transits, a lot of this astrological stuff is malefic that people go through. They have crises, they have ordeals they go through, and really it's understanding what's happening, where you can work through that stuff and transcend it or overcome it, or purify it down. So I that's usually what I do, but I teach a lot of different things as well. So if people wanted like private training, I can always offer that. I have done classes and like ceremonies in the past, but right now I'm not currently doing anything on a regular basis. So I'm doing more private work, which is kind of what I prefer anyways. I like to go deep with people and like really take them to the next level, because a lot of people get stuck or stagnant in certain ways, and everyone's got their own background and experience. So maybe some certain practices or spiritual traditions might work better for them,
I love that. And I love that you have the versatility and you can personalize, a session for somebody by first seeing their chart. And that gives you like back to astrology and my love for astrology, because it just is such a beautiful tool. Of course it would be demonized. Of course it's demonized. Of course it's what they don't want us to know. It's insider trading news. Like, seriously, I'm listening to everybody. I'm listening to everybody talking about what's going on with digital currency and silver and gold. I'm like, it's in the stars. Like, no wonder they don't want you to know. How do you think they know what they know? Like, how do you think the insider traders, know what they know?
There's that famous quote, millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires use it.
Exactly. Exactly. And so, I love for anybody that's listening and anybody that's interested in meeting with you and going deeper and maybe even trying to find out what meditation or prayer looks like for them, what path, what their path might look like. And I had a young lady the other day that I met at Spirit Fest, and she wanted to dive a little bit deeper. Like, I didn't know I was going to be doing readings. It's not what I set out to do. I had my book, and Spirit Fest was like, well, but we have a reader's table. And I was like, okay, all right, let's do this. And it's just been amazing. It's been fun. And it's been, when people sit down with you for like 20 minutes and they leave in tears, but good tears, and they have information and they have direction and they have something to do with it. Cause like I told this one lady yesterday, she was sitting with me and, she starts crying, and I do use tarot, which is shocking to me. You know why it's shocking? Because it was the thing I was so terrified of. It was the final thing I would not touch with a 10-foot pole. And here I am. And the funny thing is, like, God shows up in the cards. Like when somebody is like, in a Christian path, or like, they use the word God a lot in their life, the emperor comes in. And so like, it's just so funny how like, like it's coming up. So I'm sitting with this lady yesterday, and she's, the crying, that things are happening because the stuff that her soul wanted out, her soul wanted to be seen, but she wasn't ready to be that vulnerable and say it. It came immediately out. And you're both in this vulnerable place because you don't know me from a hole in the wall, but now I'm seeing your stuff with you. And I like the cards because they can't blame me. Right. Because it came through, it's a symbolism coming from, I tell them, this is your energy, your consciousness, and we're just interpreting this together. And she goes, well, I didn't know this was going to come up, and she says, why does it have to be a bad reading? And I said, well, see, hold on. We've only just got started. I was like, it's bad because you don't want to see it and feel it, but it's good because this is exactly what's holding you back from your abundance and your prosperity and your health and your wholeness. And so do you want to sit here and let me fluff your feathers, or do you want to walk away with something that's going to help you, to empower you and to help heal you? And so ultimately she did leave on a high note. But when you sit with somebody and you work with somebody and you're able to, like in a situation like that, I'm not looking at their chart, but when you can sit with somebody on a personal level, and I also do to some degree, but I would absolutely recommend Jessica. She knows the astrology. Matter of fact, I will be sitting with Jessica for my astrology and probably hiring her for some private sessions as well to help me dive even deeper. You gave me the book for Inner Christianity, which it is not an easy read.
Yeah.
But I love it, but I have to chew on it in
Yeah, you have to
pieces.
just go
Yeah.
through parts, because
Yeah.
again, that was written from someone who didn't want to. He brought in a little bit of Gnosticism, but he didn't want to, because again, the fundamentalist Christians are so like anti-Gnosticism. So he's approaching it from more a mystical Christianity, and that's what I liked about his approach. Because when I bring up Gnosticism to people that are like super rigid, they won't even listen to me. Oh, it's demonic, it's evil, it's heretical, and they don't even understand the Gnosticism. They're not even willing to listen to my explanation, because there are corrupted versions of Gnosticism as well. There's corruptions everywhere, right? So they just like take this like heretical, more perverted or corrupted versions and say, oh, it's all Gnosticism. It's like they missed the whole point, So what I like about him with the Inner Christianity is he kind of like stayed away from that, even though he brought in a couple chapters what Gnosticism was and things like that. But he just broke down the Gospels, and that's kind of what I do too, because there's so much in the Bible that's alchemical and astrological, and there's references to internal things you're supposed to be doing, purification, different stuff. And that's all lost because people take it so literal, and it's sad because it does such a disservice. And again, with these people that are more into the New Age and these other spiritual traditions, they're like anti-Christian now. And, and it's sad because there's so much beauty there. And what a lot of people are missing right now is that more Christic connection, that energy there, and that can be revealed through the study of the Bible in this deeper way.
Yeah, it's true. And even though I had gone to that place where I was still in the wounding of the rejection from church. And so it was like I couldn't go back and revisit it yet, but I am at that place now. And I think it did happen kind of fast, because some people can sit in that place for a long time. And I knew that I had to find that balance. And the more I explored other paths, as immediately shown to me that it's everywhere. It's not just Christianity, it's everywhere, it's everything. And we do have to have fish eyes. We have to be able to grow that gift of discernment, and growing the gift of discernment, is something that you grow and you have to practice using. And there is trial and error, and sometimes you're going to be wrong, and you fine tune that calibration more and more. And the beauty is, especially if you're a Christian or you're coming from a Christian background, why not embrace the thing that we teach, which is grace? Like, we all have grace for the journey. And that was the other part of me having the freedom to unravel from it, is because I truly believed. Some Christians would say, don't preach that greasy grace. And I would say, well, grace is greasy, because they're growing is sloppy. And so there is some greasy grace for us when we're in that space, again, when the heart is seeking, there's a lot of grace. There's nobody who is genuinely seeking is setting out intentionally to screw things up or to get it wrong or whatever. So just, keeping that heart, doing the work in the heart to make sure we're not being led by offense. We're not being led by bitterness. We're not being led by ego, and learning what that means, what that looks like. Having somebody in your life, like, accountability in church is really big. And New Age, nobody wants accountability. Nobody wants accountability for nothing, right? So, and even people want to sit down and get their cards read, and the minute like the cards say something, they're like, it's like, it's like, I think part of that process of growing and being able to get to that place where you can go inside, you can trust the voice that the divine inside of you, you can trust your discernment. Part of the growth process in that is having the accountability of someone, at least for, like you said, you had your mentor who was a huge reason why. Somebody that can see your blind spots, somebody that can speak into them. And of course, you have to feel safe with them, because if you don't feel safe with them, you're not going to allow them to tap in and show you those things. So, so I hope that anybody that's listening, how can they find you?
They could find more active on Facebook. I did recently create an Instagram, but I have my website, which is astral/alchemy.com.
That's right.
Yeah. Maybe you can put like a link somewhere where you post this.
I will, and they can follow you or friend you or message you on Facebook. So here we are. Perfect. All right, lovely. I'm so thankful for you. Like so thankful for you, and we'll be in touch again soon.
Sure. I look forward to the next time.
Yeah, me too. All right. Talk to you later.
All right. Bye.
Yeah.